我每次反省我习得汉语的路程，我不得不承认，我最终成功的基础就是我当时终于长大了。So did you catch that? I basically said, whenever I look back at the scope of my acquisition of Mandarin, I can't help but recognize that the essential bedrock of my success was that I grew the hell up. And so to give a little context to that, I moved to China when I was 23 years old, but I didn't start learning Mandarin until I was 25. And, why did I wait 2 years? Well, it's kind of because I was living out a bit of an extended adolescence and extended university time, and I think a lot of people can identify with that. So let me just get into what I'm talking about here. When I moved to China at 23 years old, I was just inundated with shiny objects. I was in a brand new city, Beijing, with a new culture and food and experiences. And while all of this was wonderful, it did allow me to remain distracted from a sort of creeping feeling that I wasn't really improving as a person in a measurable way or taking responsibility for my future. I was kind of just, like I say, an extended adolescence going on. And the expat drinking culture was highly alluring and, undeniably super fun, because at the end of the day, if you go out on a Friday night in Beijing, who are you going to meet? Well, you're going to meet somebody who shares something in common with you. They moved to China, but they're from Sweden or India or Australia, New Zealand, Canada, another part of the States. They're from, some place in Africa, and you're going to be really excited to get into a conversation with somebody like that. And so it's super alluring, super exciting, and making conversation and friends was, it was just easy because everybody had something in common. And so it was a really fun time. But the problem, however, was that most of the young people in this community were staving off adulthood like I was and doing their best to kind of extend the university party life. And, people back home, what were they doing? Well, they were starting careers, they're getting married, they're having kids. The young expats in Beijing, teaching English hungover and finding any excuse to head over to Sanlitore or Wudaokou, which are kind of nightlife areas in Beijing, to go there and dance and get wasted and hook up. And when I look back at that time, it's fair to say that I wasn't trying to build a career. I wasn't trying to gain important skills. I was just trying to pursue the pleasurable experiences in life and as frequently as possible. And, don't get me wrong, I have no regrets about moving to China. It was in many ways the greatest decision of my life, but it did require me to go through a period of sort of a downfall. The moment when the Peter Pan, I don't want to grow up phase had to come to an end. And so let me talk about what that downfall was. So it's 2012. I transitioned from teaching English to drumming as my primary source of income, which is a whole other story. It was super thrilling. And making a living playing drums, it was awesome, but it was also illusory. I wasn't saving that much money because I just assumed it would keep coming in, because I actually had quite a bit of success in the spring, summer of 2012. And I was like, I'll just keep getting gigs. And I'm just, I'm flush right now. I'm rolling in it. So I didn't really plan for the future in that way. I didn't think I had a good weekend, let me save that away. I went I had a good weekend, let me have a even more fun time in Sanlitore, right? Yeah. So I was not saving much money. And then I didn't realize, because I started making my primary income in spring of 2012, that by the time winter of late 2012 and 2013 was going to roll around, that the gigs for drummers and bands really dry up in Beijing because it's super cold and most people want to have their events in the warmer weather. So I didn't know that was coming. And so I was completely unprepared, and I was spending all my time and money on short-term pleasure. So my money in my bank account started to dwindle as the gigs dried up. And I acutely remember, it was December 2012, and I was walking around the central business district of Beijing, and I had 90 kwai in my pocket, and that was all the money I had to my name. So if you don't know, that's about $12.50 US. So it was grim. I remember just feeling absolutely terrible. The bill had come due for all of my pleasure seeking, and the price was a truckload of involuntary suffering because I felt terrible. I remember I thought to myself at the time, like, I couldn't even afford to take a girl out on a date right now, which just is, I'm sure that a lot of young men can probably empathize with the fact that that's a pretty dark feeling to have, because you feel like it's not even just that I couldn't be a successful person who, you know, gets a lot of the things that they want out of life. It's that I can't even like go out to dinner. You know, it's just very dark, and it was grim. That was probably the most psychological agony I've ever experienced. And as we all probably know quite well, there's no better teacher than pain. Pain will make you sort your crap out, you know, really quickly. So from there came an opportunity in a glorious stroke of luck. And I do not deny that this was very lucky. I got a phone call about a drumming job in Chengdu, China. And it was a nightly gig at a new nightclub that was opening, and it was not like I had a choice at the time. I had 90 kwai to my name, so I accepted the job. And in that moment, I vowed, I was like, I would not waste this opportunity. It paid well. I was like, okay, I'm gonna really work hard. We practiced every day. We performed every night, 7 days a week. There were no days off. And I knew it was time that I grew the hell up and started sacrificing for my future. You know, I finally understood, you know, in my bones that sacrifice is about choosing voluntary pain now to avoid involuntary pain later. And that pain is usually worse. I mean, certainly it was worse when I was walking around the central business district of Beijing feeling as low as I've ever been. And so I'm working at this nightclub, playing drums every night, and I finally have the way to get into my redemptive arc. So this is how I could sum up the details of how I turned my life around. I started making my bed. That was one of the basic things that I started doing. And it's funny, I actually just this morning saw an Alex Hormozy short where he was making fun of people who are like, just make your bed and you'll succeed and whatever. He's like, I made $1 million and I didn't make my bed. Oh, how did I do it? It's not about the specific thing of saying like making your bed turns you into some kind of guru. It's not that. It's just that making my bed was the thing that taught me that when you wake up and you do something that is a sacrifice for the future, it's minor, it's just putting some sheets over the bed, but it is something that is slightly inconvenient. You don't really feel like doing it, but you just go, this will make me feel a little bit better later, and that sets you off on a path for the rest of the day if you do the next thing that's in a similar way, that is kind of like being nice to your future self. It's taking care of yourself. Like a lot of it is just a sort of love that you're giving to your future self by not taking from it now and being selfish from your present self. You're going like, later I will really enjoy that I have this nice bed to get into. So that's what I started to do. I started to look at everything in my life and go, how can I sacrifice the present for the future in some way? And you know, it may be mildly inconvenient to do this stuff, but the attitude travels through your day, and then your week, and then your month, and then your year, and then your life, right? So this is something that you might think is minor. And far be it for me to disagree with Alex Hormozy. He's a much more successful businessman than I am. But I think that that first choice makes a huge difference. That attitude has kept me committed to Mandarin Blueprint and ultimately, you know, Mandarin in general my whole life since then. So whether you apply this suffering-induced wisdom to Chinese learning or really anything else, it's not only the stick of avoiding future pain that ought to motivate you. Like, oh, I don't want to have this grim feeling of having no money while walking around the central business district of Beijing. Like, yeah, sure, that sucks, and that is a good motivator. But remember, too, that there's a carrot as well. Every day, I feel immense satisfaction that I can consume and communicate in Mandarin. That's the carrot. I feel incredible pride and accomplishment. It's not so much pride, it's more like accomplishment and satisfaction that I have achieved this seemingly impossible goal, but it was just about daily consistency. And so there is still a deeper pearl of wisdom that I found that I think is more profound during this time. I also got this from developing an exercise habit, which is that in the decade I've spent putting the pain, quote unquote, first and the satisfaction second, I've realized that when you experience how this cycle of suffering and satisfaction works, the pain becomes pleasurable immediately. Let me say that again. When you experience how this cycle of suffering and satisfaction works, the pain becomes pleasurable immediately. And when I know that I'm improving my skill in something because I'm sacrificing my present for my future, the quote unquote pain actually feels good, right? And it's the same thing, like, for example, when I'm running and it's painful, but I'm realizing that I'm improving my capacity, my lung capacity, and I'm getting stronger, and I'm getting that cardio workout that I know is so good for my brain. Because I'm doing it in that moment, I actually start to get that pleasure, and that pleasure leads to a runner's high, which is actually incredibly pleasurable and painful at the same time. Because, running is painful, there's no way around it, but it does feel good knowing that I'm taking care of myself in that moment. And this convergence of the pleasure and pain, well, this is what the Taoists have been talking about for millennia. Pain and pleasure are two sides of the same coin. They even made a neat little symbol to represent it, the yin-yang symbol. And I actually like it too, because when you run from pain, when you run from the yin out of the black part into the white part, what happens is you end up getting sucked into that little black circle that's in the white section of the yin yang. And then that pulls you back into the drowning in the negativity. So when I was pursuing pleasure and running from the pain, you get sucked back into it and completely immersed in the pain. And so that's what ends up really happening. So what you want to try to do is ride the middle. Do the things that are slightly painful now so that you can have those pleasurable experiences. And a lot of times it's like you've got a foot in both. So you're kind of having the pain and pleasure at the same time. I kind of imagine it like, as I'm doing the deadlift, I'm enjoying the time on the couch with my wife. As I'm running and feeling the pain of cardio, I'm having that enjoyable dinner where I am even more satisfied by it because it's coming after a big workout. Or going through my flashcards and struggling to understand something in Mandarin, but then later I'm having the conversation. They all are two sides of the same coin. They live in each other, and when you can ride that middle, that's when you can actually find some degree of contentment in life, because there is no such thing as a fully pleasurable life that has no pain at all. And so we might as well accept that pain and pleasure are two sides of the same coin. They're going to come in probably equal measure. Wouldn't you rather choose your pain? Wouldn't you rather choose how it happens? And then it might even just end up happening at the same time when you live right in the center of that bullseye. So make your bed, do your flashcards, challenge yourself. I think you might just stumble upon the meaning of life in the process.